This episode is brought to you by Vital Farms. Isn't it bullshit to have to question where your food comes from? At Vital Farms, you can trace your pasture-raised eggs all the way back to the source, the pasture. On the side of each pasture-raised carton of eggs, you'll find the name of the farm where your eggs were laid. And when you look the farm up on their website, you'll get a peek at all the sunshine, fresh air, and open space the hens enjoy. Learn more and find out where to buy them at vitalfarms.com. Vital Farms, keeping it bullshit free.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. That's the sound of switching your business to Shopify, the global commerce platform that supercharges your selling. Harness the best converting checkout and same intuitive features, trusted apps, and powerful analytics used by the world's leading brands. Stop leaving sales on the table. Discover why millions trust Shopify to build, grow, and run their business. Sign up today for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/tech23.
This episode is brought to you by Kia's first 3-row all-electric SUV, the Kia EV9, with available all-wheel drive and seating for up to 7 adults, with a 0 to 60 speed that thrills you 1 minute and available reclining lounge seats that unwind you the next. Visit kia.com/EV9 to learn more. Ask your Kia dealer for availability. No system, no matter how advanced, can compensate for all driver error and or driving conditions. Always drive safely.
Between the kids being home and hosting, everything in our house gets used up in summer. With Instacart, I can save money by stocking up on all my favorite summer brands. I save time by getting everything delivered in as fast as an hour. And I save myself a sink full of dirty dishes by stocking up on paper plates for the annual summer cookout. Save more on summer essentials? Spend more time enjoying summer. Add summer to cart. Download the app to get free delivery on your first 3 orders. Offer valid for a limited time. Minimum $10 per order. Additional terms apply.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. No matter how big you want to grow, Shopify gives you everything you need to take your business to the next level. Shopify is the commerce platform that makes it easy to show up and sell exactly the way you want to. No need to code or design. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period today. Visit shopify.com/offer23 to get started.
Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. We're your source for personal, professional, and organizational growth and development, where we share original research, explore industry trends, and interview executives and thought leaders from across the globe. We hope you join us often for practitioner-oriented content around all things related to leadership, HR, talent management, organizational development, and change management. Maximize your personal and organizational potential with Human Capital Innovations Podcast. If you enjoy the Human Capital Innovations Podcast, enjoy ad-free listening by going to the Patreon page, and please consider contributing even at the producer or sponsorship level. And please leave a review. Thank you for your support. Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. In this HCI podcast episode, I talk with Solange Charas and Stella Lupashore about the work of the future and the trends, the art, and the practice of transitioning to a reimagined workplace. Solange Charas and Stella Lupashore, welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast.
Thrilled to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you both. You're joining us from the New Jersey, New York area. I'm south of Salt Lake City in Utah. And today we're going to be talking about your recent book, about the work of the future and trends, the art, and the practice of transitioning to a reimagined workplace. And I think this is such an important topic. It's one that I spend a lot of my time and energy on and in this space as well. So I think this will just be a really fun conversation. As we get started, I wanted to share my guest bios with everybody. Solange Charas is the founder and CEO of HC Moneyball, an adjunct professor and a governance researcher and thought leader. Her SaaS product, HC Metrics, delivers capabilities for subscribers to quantify the material impact of human capital on corporate performance and understand the effectiveness of human capital programs in generating HCROI. She is an expert in the area of human capital disclosures required out of a variety of SDG governance frameworks, the SEC and the ISO. And she has served on public boards and has held the chairperson role for audit and compensation committees. She has also served on private, for-profit, nonprofit, and higher education boards. Stella Lupashar is a thought leader, speaker, educator, and futurist on a mission to humanize the workplace through the use of design thinking, technology, analytics, and future thinking to create inclusive workplaces. She is the co-author of Humanizing Human Capital, Invest in Your People for Optimal Business Returns, and Humans at Work, the art and practice of creating the hybrid workplace. A pleasure to have you both with me today. Anything else either or both of you would like to share with me and my audience by way of your background or personal context before we dive on in?
I think that the conversation is going to probably shed more light on how we think and how we operate.
Perfect. So why don't we start with a little bit of a background to your recent book. Tell us about kind of the how and the why behind it. Why this book? Why now? Why did you feel like it was important to share? And then we can start to dig in and pull apart, some of the key elements that you focus on in your book.
Stella and I were introduced by a mutual acquaintance who saw something that in each of us that would resonate with the other. And he was absolutely right. When we met, for me, it was finding another sister from a different mother. And we, as Stella would say, we were finishing each other's sentences even in that first meeting. And my focus is on data analytics and the use of data to inform decisions. And Stella's interest was on the future of work. And we had talked about how there are books that talk about data analytics and there are books that talk about the future of work, but there wasn't a book that really combined the two interests, the two streams. We talked a lot in the early days about the signals that organizations give and how HR people are sort of deaf to those signals because they have no way to transform or translate those signals into actions. And even if they did, if they're deaf to the signals, they're probably not aware of the future trends and how to apply those signals to anticipate the future of work and support their organizations in the service of sustainable enterprise performance. And that's the other thing that we had in common, that as Dave Ulrich would say, we don't do HR for the sake of HR. We do HR in the service of the organization and the customers of the organization. So that's how I think that was the germ of or the genesis of the book. Stella, do you have anything?
Yeah, and we were talking about writing for quite some time. And when we did start, so pandemic started as well. So it, on one side, created the space for us to put down our thoughts. On the flip side, it also accelerated a lot of trends that we've been talking about. We have seen how the focus from just primarily on shareholder value creation has shifted, how safety and some of these fundamental workplace expectations became critical in order to get access to your employees, be able to enable them to be productive and continue the operations as a business. So the timing couldn't have been more perfect for us to write this, because on one side we see an acceleration of a lot of these trends and the importance of workers. We also are privileged to have access to much more sophisticated technology and more types of data that we can use and analyze to detect some of those signals and then make informed decisions.
Let me just add, timing is everything. So Stella was saying the timing was right about the writing of the book, but the timing is right for exogenous the market, right? And we're seeing a lot more pressure from different stakeholders for transparency around the impact of human capital management and human capital performance on enterprise level outcomes. So we're seeing investors asking for more transparency about workforce trends and workforce sustainability. We're seeing customers demanding more information about workforce conditions and LGBTQ and diversity as part of their purchase intent. And I think that's huge when you have a customer saying, I want to know what's going on in your organization about HR before I'll buy your product. That's huge pressure on CEOs and boards and executive management teams to not only understand what's going on, but to create the right story, the right narrative about human capital performance. And of course, we have employees, right? We have the millennials and the Gen Zs seeking their voice, I guess, exerting their voice, seeking agency. And I love to say, I'm from Missouri, right? The show me state. Don't tell me what you're going to do for me. Show me what you've done for others that look like me coming into your organization. So I think employees are really getting a lot more sophisticated about how they make decisions to join a company and stay with a company related to how companies treat them as capital, as something to invest in.
Yeah, very well said. I know one of the things you talk about are what you call the 4Ds. And I want to explore that a little bit. So how the demographic, digitization, the datafication, and the disintermediation are disrupting how, where, and when, and the why of how we work. Let's pull that apart a little bit. Tell us a little bit more about how you approach that in your book and why you think this is really important for leaders and for organizations to be thinking about these 4Ds.
These are some of those bigger, longer term, slower trends. And many times as organizations, we think they may not impact us, or it may not impact our organization in the short term. Therefore, we shouldn't pay attention. But when we are looking at how during the pandemic, we saw distinct demographic changes or demographic segments that made different decisions. We had a lot more people who were kind of senior workers who decided to leave the workplace earlier because they wanted more safe conditions, or they were trying to find jobs and due to ageism, they couldn't and they gave up looking. We saw a lot more women exiting the labor force because they couldn't cope with the responsibilities of home caring, homeschooling, and work and balancing the two. We saw a lot more people in underserved, underprivileged, undertapped communities, disproportionately represented in essential workers who also then got laid off or furloughed. So we saw a lot of people moving away from metropolitan areas to further out into the second-tier cities, just because they wanted better quality of life, better proximity maybe to their families. And a lot of these movements and tendencies of different segments of our population are important because it impacts our ability to find this talent, to attract them, to engage. They may need different types of offerings from the organization, different type of support. So the more we can consider the needs and understand better what it's like to be a worker representing certain demographic segments, the more likely we'll be able to create more inclusive practices. The digitization.
Wait, let me add something on the demographics. So one of the key philosophies of our book is that human capital or business models have to evolve. They have been evolving. So, we started with a production business model where the bottleneck was how well and how fast we can make products. And then we moved to a technology-centric business model that actually employed and deployed technology to enhance the way we made decisions about how we run our businesses. And I believe we're currently in a customer-centric business model where most organizations focus on the consumer and what they need to deliver to that consumer to organize the way they get work done. And Stella and I posit that we're actually in a transition, moving towards a more human capital-centric business model where organizations realize that the bottleneck is people and talent, and that their businesses depend on how well people and talent are managed for sustainable business outcomes. Along with that employee-centric business model needs to be a shift in the way we think about people. So the production and the technology and the customer business models really relied on standardization. And that standardization was reflected in the way that we treat people. We had one set of policies that everybody had to abide by, and one set of compensation approaches or reward approaches, or one set of talent management approaches. And what we're proposing is that with a human capital centric business model, the days of standardization have to go by the wayside. And we need to adopt a more personalized approach to the employee and addressing their needs. And that's why understanding your demographic becomes so important, because we've got 5 generations in the workplace. And those 5 generations don't have the same values, the same needs, the same desires, the same, interests in terms of the social contract between themselves and their organization. And the better we understand those different demographics, the better we'll be able to design programs that actually meet the needs of the demographic groups you have represented, and generate higher levels of engagement, longer levels of tenure, lower levels of attrition, more inclusion in the workplace, because people can bring their true and authentic self to the workplace because they feel like they're being heard. So we have employee voice and agency also represented there. So understanding the demographics is really important, not only inside of your organization, but also understanding that the workforce is shrinking. There are just fewer laborers there. The baby boomers are retiring, and the millennials and the Gen Zs are going to comprise 75% of the workforce by 2025. Are you ready? Do you understand those 2 generations and what they need? And the generation that's coming after that, the alphas, right? So, sorry, I just wanted to augment that. So digitization.
No. Digitization is really adoption of technology. And on one side, it enables us to interact differently, enables us to create new business models. It enables us to interact with organizations and brands in a very different way and create value for ourselves, for the society. And the beautiful part of and the kind of the negative side effect of it comes from the massive amount of data that gets generated. So on one side, we can analyze and understand patterns and detect some of those signals and be able to influence behavior in hopefully positive way, but obviously it comes with significant amount of responsibility, because when it's misused or when skewed or biased data is being used to train algorithms that then normalize discrimination or normalize societal ills that we're currently trying to eradicate, all of that requires a very different human intervention and mindset in adopting and using, as well as in decision making. So that's where we foresee HR playing a significant role as more and more of these technologies get adopted, as more and more the analytics practices of people management get matured and increasingly use data, to really not forget that there is a human represented in that number, that there is a career, there is an aspiration, a future. So quantifying makes sense because it allows you to speak the language of the business and bring facts to the table. At the same time, it brings a very different degree of responsibility when using it. And then the last disintermediation is really around the value chain that gets disrupted by technology first organizations that are moving into adjacent spaces to disrupt the value chain. So think of Amazon, right? The perfect example where they started in the book retail business that moved into all sorts of other products, into cloud technology, into electronics, into content production, Oscars, going to space. There's not one single industry or sector that hasn't been affected or touched by this technology first company that now has created its own set of intermediaries but disrupting the traditional incumbents.
I like that when Stella says organizations that are adopting the 4Ds tend to scare the employee population. And the fear is, oh, my job is going to be replaced with a robot. So the first thing that Stella says, if you'll allow me to quote you, is we still need humans to run those robots. Yeah. So even if your job is being replaced, being automated, we still need humans to do work. And what I say is when we are replacing the repetitive, rote, low value aspects of jobs with technology, with machine learning, with robotics, with digitization, like chatbots as customer service, you actually create the space, create the opportunity to design more cognitive laden, more interesting work for humans to do. And because we understand that we have to retool, we have to retrain. Organizations also, because the research shows that the more you invest in training and development, the better your company does. Organizations are more inclined now to provide training and development, to reskill and retool and upskill to strengthen their organization's bench strength. So don't be afraid of these trends. These trends are actually helping humans. That's why we call it humanizing human capital. And, as we sort of address the naysayers that say, well, the 4Ds dehumanize the whole process. It's actually the opposite. So here's my, Star Trek geekiness. Dr. Spock would say, who isn't a doctor, sorry. Spock would say, the wrong Spock. Spock would say, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. And these 4Ds help you actually understand the needs of the many and not just hear the squeaky wheel that make organizations take action that actually hurt more people than they help.
Yeah, well said. And I think as you're describing those 4Ds, of course, clear implications for the shifting nature of work and defining the future of work. Unfortunately, we don't have time to get into all of that today, but I did want to hit on, before we wrap things up with this conversation, around evolving the employment value proposition with our people as the nature of work shifts. And as you just described, each wave of the Industrial Revolution, and people talk about how we're in Industry 4.0, automation has always been a part of that. And every time there's been some new form of automation, now we're just talking about advanced robots, AI, deep machine learning, but there's always been some form of automation. And every time that takes away the repetitive, rote tasks, the things that most people don't like to do anyways, and it creates a whole new slate of opportunities that didn't exist previously. So there's always going to be humans doing important work. I just think we're going to be doing more meaningful, more important work because we can automate the rest of it, that most people don't want to do anyways. All of this shifts, though, that employment value proposition. And there's this shifting psychological contract, the changing social contract between workers and employers. Let's talk about that just a little bit in our remaining few minutes together.
Can I just compliment the fact that you use the word workers as opposed to employees? Number one, we have significantly broader set of options when it comes to the talent pools we can utilize to perform the work. And increasingly, we tend to focus on employees as the primary group, when in fact we have contractors, we have freelancers, we have teams, we have partnerships, we have all sorts of relationships with individuals who are helping us or partnering with us to perform the work. And we need to think of them holistically. And when it comes to value proposition, they all come to work for different reasons, right? I hope most of them want to work for a company that provides safe working conditions, that provides fair remuneration. But the more you think about that pyramid of needs, the more complex it gets. Some people want to learn a new skill. Some people want to be affiliated with an organization that is going to amplify their personal brand. Some people want to have access to perks and well-being benefits. Some people want to have pride for the company's products and brand in the marketplace. Some people want to leave a legacy. So the more we can understand and use the data to understand the preferences and needs, because those will differ depending on the life stage, depending on their circumstances at home, health conditions, cognitive abilities, all of those things are now becoming easier to quantify, and we can then start adapting and personalizing the offerings to different segments and what they expect. Yes, this may be a little bit more complex from a HR perspective, but again, analytics and data and technology can provide that type of personalization. Or at the minimum, as an organization, we need to think, what is it that we want to be known for as a company, and how can we build those propositions into the decisions that we're making about the workforce, because that will then attract the talent that is compelled or attracted by that.
Yeah, and John, you were talking about, back through the Industrial Revolution, how technological advances have actually been the root cause of transformation and change. The one big difference going back to the 1700s, the beginning of the Industrial Revolution to today, is that we always had a growing labor force. The world population was growing. The world population is slowing down to the point where it's approaching zero growth and will go negative in the next 10 years or so, right, Stella? And that puts a different kind of pressure on organizations, because the one input into the business model, which is labor, is becoming more and more scarce. And that's why we think human capital centric business models is the future trend, because of that labor scarcity. So it's interesting to think of these sort of environmental differences, and I don't mean environment like green, I mean, work conditions, business conditions. And, John, you brought up a point about calling them workers, which Stella sort of supported. It's not just doing good business where we think about our input into the model that represents labor. The investors are looking at that. So the SEC is asking for transparency about the different types of laborers or workers you have in your organization, because it does correlate to an organization's sustainability, right? As I said before, 80%, or maybe I didn't say it yet, 80% of the US GDP is service oriented. We need people to deliver services. And if your organization can't manage the talent, can't source the talent, can't retain the talent, you lose your competitive advantage. And that's why it's so central to a business model. And finally, the business model is catching up to what CEOs have been saying for the last 20 years. People are our greatest asset. Well, now it's time to prove that that philosophy is actually alive and well in your organizations.
Yeah. Well said. Stella and Solange, it's been a real pleasure. I note the time, it's just flown by. We could go on and on and on all day, I think, but I do need to let you go. So before we wrap things up for today, I wanted to give you a chance to share with the audience how they can connect with you, find out more about your work, your teams, where they can find your book, and then give us a final word on the topic for today.
So you can find us on LinkedIn, Stella Lupushor and Solange Charas. You can find more details about the book and where to purchase it on humanizinghumancapital.com. So that's the name of the book, the name of the website as well. And if there is one word of kind of closure, we think a lot of transformation and change has to happen at bigger scale, at societal scale, but many times the way humanizing is experienced is one person at a time, is how you choose to react, how you choose to make a decision, how you choose to have empathy for your colleague or your direct report. So always we always are presented those opportunities to bring that humanity back into the work environment. So I would encourage everyone to take advantage of those moments when they occur.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm all for a human-centric workplace. I think you've shared so many great insights here, and there's many more to be unpacked from your book. I encourage my audience to reach out, get connected, find out more about what Stella and Solange can do for you. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe, that you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great week. Do you enjoy the Human Capital Innovations podcast? Enjoy ad-free listening by going to the Patreon page, and please consider contributing even at the producer or sponsorship level. And please leave a review. Thank you for your support. Thanks again for joining us for this episode of the Human Capital Innovations podcast. I hope you stay healthy and safe and that you have a great week.